Hey everybody, this is Marcus Stewart and welcome to Call It in the Ring. This is a wrestling recap and discussion of all things WWE, and we are looking at the 1000th episode of Smackdown Live, which took place on October 16th, 2018 in Washington, D.C. You gotta cue that musical medley. Oh, do 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 do. The beautiful people, do 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 do. Oh, and I would be denied, 'cause all I got left is my pride. Let it roll, I'm unstoppable. Let it roll. Yeah, you like that Smackdown musical medley there? And the show kicked off with its own very, very cool montage of SmackDown's big moments. It's weird that I was afraid they weren't going to do something like that, even though you would think they would, because the 1,000 episodes is a big milestone. But you know how a lot of times WWE treats SmackDown as like a second-class citizen at times. So I was like, man, they really should open it with something like that, but I don't know. But thankfully, it gets a big montage, kind of in the vein of Monday Night Raw, the montage that opened up Raw 25 earlier this year. Very much the SmackDown version of that. So you got to see some of the big moments as well as some little stuff that you might have forgotten about. So I'm a big sucker for those kind of video packages, so I had a really good time watching that. We opened up the show with Truth TV. Surprisingly, R-Truth and Carmella sitting in the ring, they get a big reception, and R-Truth talks about saying that in all the years that Truth TV has been on the air, he can't believe this is happening, basically. Of course, Carmella corrects him, saying that this is only they've only had one episode of Truth TV, and it was canceled. But never mind that, because we get a dance break. I'm dancing right now because of the dance break. And then he introduces his first guest, which needs no introduction. It's Stephanie McMahon, which, of course, makes sense given that, as Stephanie reminds us, that she was the very first SmackDown general manager. She talks a bit about how SmackDown has realized the vision that she had for it back in the day, but doesn't get to talk too long because Shane McMahon makes his big return. He's been gone for about like 8-9 months since the Kevin Owens feud wrapped up last year. And he comes to the ring dancing, and him and Stephanie get into their normal bickering, talking about how he was, as SmackDown commissioner, made the show awesome, and going back and forth about what show is the A show between Raw and SmackDown. And this goes on for a little bit until Vince McMahon makes a rare appearance, coming out to the ring. It's always nice to see Vince. He's getting older, and it's gotten to the point where you kind of, at least for me, kind of cherish every time you see the guy make his way to the ring. Never know when it might be the last time, as morbid as that sounds, but I can't help but think that now that he's getting up there. But Vince comes out, and of course he talks about, nobody wants to see Shane and Stephanie bicker about which show is better. They want to be entertained, because that's what you want to be entertained, damn it. That's what the E stands for in WWE, entertainment. And he's like, well, how do we do that? And he ponders this question for a bit as the fans chant what? And Stephanie says that the fans don't need to chant what, because Vince has his hearing aid on today. And then Vince says, dance break. And there it is. We get a dance party with all five people, the three McMahons and Truth and Carmella. Get to see Vince busted out, doing a little bit of stand back action. And if you don't know what stand back is, I encourage you to YouTube stand back Vince McMahon, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, this is just a fun little opening segment, and just a cute way to kick off the show. Our first match of the night, AJ Styles teaming up with Daniel Bryan, his opponent for the WWE Championship at WWE Crown Jewel, to take on the Usos, which that sounds like a good match on paper. And of course the story is, AJ and Bryan, how are they going to work together? They're opponents, and they're taking on a seasoned team in the Usos. The AJ and Bryan hold their own for a bit. They they're doing pretty good. At one point, they lock in their submissions at the same time on the Usos. Of course, the calf crusher for AJ and the yes lock for Bryan. Unfortunately, some miscommunication arises when Bryan goes to punch one of the Usos. Can't remember which one. And I'm not saying that because I can't tell which one is different, because I can tell which Uso is different. I've always heard people say that they still can't tell the difference between the Usos, when for me, it's been abundantly clear which one is which for some time now, where Jimmy is the one that always wears the hat when it comes to the ring, and Jay is the one that always has the grill and his teeth, and also his hair is different, like he has the sides shaved, so they actually are very easy to tell apart, to me, because of those differences. So, but I can't remember who was going to be on the receiving end of this errant punch from Daniel, but he ducks, and Bryan accidentally decks AJ. This distraction allows the Usos to hit their double super kick to Bryan and pick up the pin, which I'm happy with, because I was afraid that, because WWE does this a lot, where you take an established team, like the Usos, who are the definition of a true tag team, and just have them lose against a slap-together team that's never worked together and might have issues just because, for no other reason than like, well, that's how good these singles guys are. I was like, so two singles guys that have never worked together can beat a well-oiled machine of a tag team, like, on their first try? Like, nah. And I'm glad that's not what happened here. This went exactly as it should have been. Bryan and AJ glare at each other post-match, but nothing goes down yet. So, backstage, we see Paige chatting with Vicky Guerrero, Teddy Long, and John Laurinaitis, old Johnny Ace. Of course, they're all former general managers of Smackdown, Teddy Long being the longest tenured of them. We don't hear what they're saying, but they're just chatting it up. Teddy doing, probably making a tag team match, and John Laurinaitis talking about people power. Next up, we get one of the weirdest things, but one of the coolest things is Evolution. And I say weird because I've said this before, that Evolution, of course, if you're not familiar with Evolution, they are the super group of Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and the returning Batista, Dave Batista, which, again, it feels weird that point hasn't really been a focal point of this reunion. They've been teasing this reunion of Evolution for weeks now, and not really focusing on the fact that Batista, one of the greatest ever, multiple-time world champion, and now a huge Hollywood star. Of course, if you're somehow not familiar, he plays Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's kind of his big claim to fame, but he's also gone on to appear in Spectre, the 007 film. He was in the new Blade Runner. He's got his own movie, Bushwick. He's done a lot of stuff. I probably say he's under the rock right now in terms of WWE stars that have kind of hit it big in Hollywood, which I would have never predicted. So yeah, like it's weird that wasn't like made a bigger deal. Like, hey, Batista's back. Especially since he's been gone. His last appearance in WWE was 4 years ago. But Evolution comes out to the ring, looking sharp in their suits as always. And we get, of course, Batista being the hometown boy. He's from Washington, D.C. He gets some big chants. Triple H talks about, kind of gives a standard Evolution speak, talking about, well, of course, because SmackDown has evolved over the years, why not have the group that epitomizes Evolution? And then, they're talking. Rick talks for a bit, gets some moves, talking about how everything's great. And then Randy gets on the mic, and Randy was the most interesting person coming into this because obviously he's the only full-time active guy left, which makes sense given that he's the youngest. And he's also a giant, crazy heel at the moment, but he's turned off his hostile-like character and is kind of just back to being, for one night, a bit more of the legend killer Randy Orton, just being really pompous and cocky. And he starts talking about how cool this is before ripping on every member of Evolution, or at least like Triple H is more of a backhanded compliment. He's talking about how they've grown, because he's like, since Evolution, I have continued to evolve by winning, world title after world title. And I'm the only guy that's still here, basically wrestling every week, whereas Triple H is now backstage. Ric Flair is living vicariously through his daughter, and then Batista spends more time in a makeup chair than he does in in a ring or in a fight. And everyone's like, "Uh-oh." And Batista gets on the mic and he says, "You know what? I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty nervous now. It's been a while since I've been in a ring, but I'm going to savor every minute of it because he loves this." And he's even going to ignore Randy's little jab at him because that he'll let that slide because that's how happy he is to be back. And then he goes on a nice little kind of emotional speech talking about how he grew up in DC and he used to be a bouncer at a club for many years and he was just a poor kid and now he would have never guessed where he would end up. And then he kind of puts over every member of Triple H of every member of Evolution big time, including Randy, talking about how he knew Randy would be something special since he met him in OVW, and that he has more talent. And Randy has more talent in his pinky than half the locker room has in their whole bodies. Ric Flair, of course, saying what else can you really say about Ric Flair that hasn't been said before, and that he's the greatest of all time, arguably. And there's a cute little moment where I think Rick goes for a fist bump at Batista because he's still cut his promo. He doesn't notice it, so Rick's kind of left hanging. And then Rick tries again, and then Batista acknowledges it. And then he mentions saying that, just keep it in your pants, Rick, which seems to be a bit of an inside joke because Triple H and Randy kind of lose it laughing along with Rick. So that was fun. And then he gets to Triple H and talks about how Triple H pretty much is this business, saying, 14-time world champion, has done everything that there is to do in this company except for beat him. And the tone changes where Triple H is looking like the hell and Batista is looking real serious, and they have a bit of a face-to-face with Rick trying to get in between, calm it down. Randy's in the back like the little kid stirring the pot, just like, ooh, like that's the face that he has, like, all right, what's going on here? And you're just watching this unfold. And Triple H and Batista have a nice little stare down for a while until eventually they hug and nothing comes out of it. But that, kids, is called planting a seed. And this is pretty cool because I've listened to Batista in a few podcasts like Chris Jericho's and Edge and Christian's, and he's always said that he's always like he has no problem coming back to WWE to wrestle, but he doesn't want to be like a one-off like match. He wants to come back. He would only come back for like an actual like storyline or angle. And he has always said repeatedly that the one thing he has always pitched to Vince is that he wants to have a WrestleMania match against Triple H. And that for whatever reason, it just wasn't in the cards at the time or it just wouldn't happen. But that was always the one thing he would specifically say, like, I want to face Triple H at WrestleMania because it makes sense. We have history. And he thinks they would be able to tell a cool story. So to see that finally actually seems to be happening, because there's no way that match is not happening at WrestleMania unless like something happens with like Dave's schedule. But I would imagine that the fact that he would return for this and set up something like that, I would imagine that he's cleared his plate around WrestleMania time to build this match. So I'll just call it now, WrestleMania 35, Batista versus Triple H. Batista's finally getting his wish that he has been wanting for the last several years now. So that's pretty cool. Batista was much better received here than he was in 2014, probably because he was not at the unfortunate mercy of kind of trying to not to by his fault, but kind of taking the spotlight away from Daniel Bryan, who at the time was the hottest thing in the company, and Batista was put in a position of basically trying to take Bryan a spot, and then fans did not take kindly to that. And again, that was all on WWE and not on Batista. So for now that he's back where he's not in that position of getting in the way of something and can kind of just let the fans embrace him, That's a much better reception. And he cut a nice little promo talking about, hey, I've always loved the fans, whether you loved me or you called me Blue Tista or Bootista, that I've always, whether I didn't care about winning or losing, I always wanted to entertain you. The fans reacted well to it. So I think that, depending on where this goes, I'm curious to see now where the next time we see Batista. It probably won't be for a while. They have a long time before Mania, so this doesn't really have to start in earnest until at like maybe Survivor Series at the earliest. But even then, maybe probably won't start heating up till the Rumble. But we'll see. Cool stuff. Kurt Angle is on commentary for this next match, which does not last very long because it's The Miz taking on Rusev. Surprisingly, Miz does not have a bigger role in this show. I mean, I know it's only 2 hours and you got to fit a lot in, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't just do a 3-hour special, given that it's a big milestone show and they got a lot to cram in. But at the same time, I'd be terrified that the 3-hour change might become permanent, because that's what happened with the 1000th episode of Raw. So maybe count our blessings. But Miz and Rusev is not long, because about a minute or so into the match, Aiden English runs out and offers a quick distraction, which allows Miz to roll up Rusev. Also, this match was for the a qualifier for the World Cup to determine the best in the world, in case you weren't aware. So Miz is now in that match. Rusev is not. Again, much like McIntyre losing on Monday, the actual international superstars are not in this World Cup to determine the best in the world. It's all Americans so far. So it's come on, really? I know this tournament is meaningless and stupid, but come on. After the match, Aiden, like an idiot, hangs around and kind of runs his mouth to Lana. Lana makes him pay, as Michael Cole would say, by kicking him right in the balls, right, and making him sing a higher note than he normally would. I don't think the commentators made that joke, which is surprising, because that's pretty low-hanging fruit for WWE. But with Aiden on the floor singing a soprano, Rusev goes out and destroys Aiden, throwing him into the stairs, throwing him into the announce table, which... See, you would think that would kind of be the payoff to this feud, because the entire point of this feud was Rusev trying to get his hands on English and English ducking him. But now that he's kind of beating the shit out of him, do they need to have a match? Because Aiden, again, presents no physical threat to Rusev. So now that we've kind of seen Rusev get some revenge, where do you go from here? I mean, this feud's not over. I don't expect it to be over. I'm not naive. But I'm just kind of just philosophically, it's well, he got him. He beat the crap out of him. I guess that's it. That's all we were kind of waiting for. So where else can it go? I'm not sure. We do go backstage and we see Edge hanging out with Kurt Hawkins, his old Edge head. No Zack Ryder, unfortunately, but we you take what you can get. This leads to the return of the Cutting Edge with the the namesake Edge coming out. It's weird to have no pyro for Edge's entrance. He throws up the rock horns, and his normal pyro flurry does not happen. It's just weird. And we also get Tony Chemmel doing his entrance, which sounds kind of weird. It almost sounds like he wasn't there and that it was a recording that played through the audio. Please welcome the Rated R Superstar Edge. Sounded weird this time. I'm pretty sure it was a recording. But Edge comes out looking a lot like he did around the time that he left. His hair is longer. Of course, that's because he's working on Vikings, TV show Vikings, a big cast member on that, big star. But yeah, he's kind of looking kind of like he did in 2010. And talks about all the stuff he's done on Smackdown, from, cashing Money in the Bank on The Undertaker to marrying Vicky Guerrero. We do not get a mention of him winning the tag titles on July 4th with Hulk Hogan, which I was expecting, because you would think with Edge being the biggest Hulk Hogan fan and that being legitimately one of his biggest and most cherished memories, that he would mention that. Is Hogan still taboo, even though he's back in the company's good graces? he came back, apologized. He seemed to have cleared the air. It just seemed weird that Edge would not bring that up. But anyways, he's here to host to kind of moderate a meeting between Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. And he says that, he's going to attempt to be the moral compass in this, which will be hard given that he's the rated R superstar, but he's going to try his best. First, he brings out Becky, and Becky is all smiles coming to the ring, and she's coming out to big chants. There was a good sign in the crowd that said the Queen Slayer, which is something that Becky should probably adopt. And Becky comes in saying that she's again is feeling pretty facey, feeling like a good guy, which is how she's reacting. But Edge, or Becky rather, is, saying how Edge is one of the people that inspired her to get into the ring and that she's always watched. Edge is like, great, because maybe you'll listen to what I have to say to you. And he goes on saying that he knows where Becky's coming from because much like her, he was not the chosen one. He was never handpicked to be a top guy, and he wasn't supposed to be on the posters and all that stuff, but he scratched and clawed his way to get there and, won championship after championship. And Becky's like, yeah, see, you understand then. And Edge is like, yeah, I understand. Thankfully, when he says that I understand, he does not jump off a ladder with a chair and put Becky through a table. I figured I have to drop Smackdown references too if we're going to celebrate the show. But he goes into this little speech saying that Becky, by betraying Charlotte and throwing their friendship away in order to become champion, it was the wrong move. Which Becky is like, huh? And Edge goes on his speech saying that, hey, when I was back in my day, when I was the main event guy, I did not hesitate to stab people in the back, and I anything that got in between me and my goals and getting to the top, I crushed it and burnt a lot of bridges along the way. And at the end of the day, despite, winning everything imaginable in WWE, he was alone. And he warns Becky saying that, she's on the same path and that, she's gonna, at the end, no matter how many titles she wins, she's not gonna like herself because she's gonna be sitting at home looking at her wall with her titles, but she's gonna be by herself, the only person enjoying it. And Becky kind of fakes getting this and says like, oh, you're right. I don't like myself. I love myself. And then goes into full-on evil Becky mode, saying that Edge needs to get out of her ring and to try not to hurt his neck again leaving, which is a big low blow. The crowd was like, oh, shit. And Edge is like, all right. This brings out Charlotte, who talks about that's a low blow, Becky, and then gets in the ring, and then immediately the fight is on with Charlotte spearing Becky down, and they start rolling around. And Edge just kind of lets this happen. He doesn't really jump in. He's just sitting against the rope watching this, which makes sense. He probably should want to see Charlotte beat the crap out of Becky after what she said. This brings out a bunch of trainers to pull the girls apart, but Charlotte kind of gets the better of this. And that wraps up this segment. Good segment. Always great to see Edge. He's always been one of my personal favorites. So yeah, fun segment all around. Let's see. Rey Mysterio runs into Jeff Hardy backstage. They share some words. This brings us to our tag title rematch. The New Day defending against The Bar. At the New Day's commentary table is set up, but this time it's got legends. And by that I mean two of them. It's Jerry Lawler and Booker T sitting at the New Day table surrounded by pancakes and cereal, giving commentary that we only hear maybe a fraction of. And this is the Big E and Xavier Woods configuration of the team. I don't know what they call that loadout. Smart muscle. Brain power. I don't know what you call it, but there it is. And this was the normal good match between these two teams. At one point, Big E hit like his Uranagi out of the corner on Cesaro, and Cesaro lands right on the back of his neck, like gets folded like an accordion, as JR might say, which looked really brutal, but Cesaro seemed to be all right. At one point, the bar hits the kind of like a doomsday device, but with Cesaro hitting an uppercut instead of a clothesline. And Sheamus tries to get his foot on the ropes, but Kofi, who is at ringside, breaks it up because he's like, nah. Xavier flips over the ref at one point, and the bar catches him and outside the ring and throws him into the barricade. And it's just things are breaking down. And then the bar starts clearing the New Day table, starts setting it up. They're going to put Kofi through the table. And we get the Big Show, of all people, coming out. And the moment that Big Show made his way to the ring, I thought to myself, he's not going to turn heel, is he? Because that would be hysterical. Like, you know, Big Show, the meme, of course, with him is that he turns heel and face, switches between good guy and bad guy, like on a dime. Like he might have more face and heel turns than any other wrestler ever. Like, the dude just does not stay good, which makes you wonder why, just in storyline and in kayfabe, why any wrestler would ever want to trust the Big Show or be associated with him, knowing that his penchant for just stabbing people in the back. So as soon as he came out, I was like, he's gonna screw the New Day, isn't he? That's what's happening here. And that's exactly what it does. He kind of chases away the bar, making you think like, oh, he's here to save Kofi from getting put through the table. And then, of course, he grabs Kofi and chokeslams Kofi through the table. The announcers act surprised, which is hysterical in its own right. The distraction allows Sheamus to bro kick the crap out of Big E and get the win and the title. So the Bar have finally become the Smackdown Tag Team Champions after kind of languishing on the show for since they arrived months ago in the draft. And it seems that Big Show, at least tonight, it might be a third ally or a new ally. They kind of pose together with the belts, so I don't know if this is the start of like a new trio or if it's just a one-night thing. But yeah, I guess on a milestone show, you kind of have to have a Big Show heel turn in there, because I'm sure maybe half of his heel turns have happened on SmackDown, so I that's kind of amusing. But yeah, I guess you got to have a big moment like that, like a title change on a milestone show. I'm surprised, because I've said before that I thought that they would hold those belts until the Bludgeon Brothers came back for the rematch, but sure. Bar, why not? Go for it. We get a selfie promo from John Cena, and he just kind of talks about SmackDown and how his personal journey from SmackDown, from his debut against Kurt Angle to becoming the Doctor of Thugonomics to, you know, all that good stuff, and is just kind of congratulating the show on hitting 1,000 episodes. This brings us to our main event match. Rey Mysterio, the returning Rey Mysterio, his first match on SmackDown in 4 years, taking on United States Champion Shinsuke Nakamura for the first time ever in kind of a dream match. I was pretty excited for this. Once again, much like Edge, it's weird to not have pyro for Rey Mysterio's entrance, but these two have a good back and forth match that I wish was a little bit longer. Rey still very much has it, as the crowd let him know. He had a cool kind of like, at one point, Nakamura gets sent to the floor, and then Rey hits like a sliding. He's like slides from the ring to the floor for like a splash that looked really nice. He did a spinning top rope Frankensteiner. There was a cool counter where Rey goes for like a springboard crossbody, and Nakamura smartly catches him with by slamming Rey into his knee, which looked painful as hell. And these two seemed to have some chemistry. They were working really well together. And the match, just when the match kind of started cooking, it ends rather abruptly with Rey hitting the 619 top rope splash, which is called referred to as dropping the dime, which I mean, no, but I guess it's the new drop in the dime. And Rey Mysterio picks up the win. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this match was for the World Cup. Was a World Cup qualifier to determine the best in the world. So Rey Mysterio is the final SmackDown entrant in the World Cup tournament to determine the best in the world. And yeah, I guess the only kind of international guy, I mean, representing Mexico. I can't remember if Rey was actually born in Mexico or not. I always forget. But I mean, if San Diego counts as its own country, then maybe. But yeah, sure. There it is. Not going to rant anymore about how silly the World Cup premise is, but Rey is in it. And like I said, this match was good. It just needed to be a little bit longer. It was cut off somewhat abruptly for reasons that will become clear very shortly. But man, it always seems like every time Nakamura is having a really good match, they always seem to end in a weird way, either because of a screwy finish or they just kind of get cut off because of time or something like that. But it's like, man, like, yeah, maybe more than any other star. It's like every time Nakamura is like on the main roster, like, man, like, this match is really getting somewhere. This is getting good. And then it's like, oh, it's over. Okay, never mind. So this is kind of another one of those. Nakamura looked like he was bleeding from the bridge of his nose a little bit. I don't know where that came from, but I would like to see these two face off again. I'm not sure if Rey has like re-signed or if this is just a one-off thing, or I guess a two-off thing, because he's going to be in the at Crown Jewel because he wants to be the best in the world. But I'm not sure if he's actually like back, or if this is just a short little stint. But if he is back, let's get a longer rematch between Nakamura and Rey, because they seem to work well together. And of course, we get to the final part of the night, which I'd completely forgotten was happening. But The Undertaker makes his return. Obviously, you gotta have The Undertaker, as SmackDown literally was his show forever. And it makes sense that the last match would be cut short because you gotta make time for that 50-minute entrance. Undertaker comes out and he says, he keeps it short and sweet by saying that he's got 3 words for DX. Rest in peace. And that's it. He just had to say that. So, yeah. You would think he could have said that to Triple H's face, given that Triple H was on the show earlier in the night. But, I mean, that's not DX Triple H, though. That's Evolution Triple H, who is like a whole different person. So maybe that's why he didn't just, show up then. But anyways, that wraps up the show. As far as milestone shows go, this was pretty good. It was better than Raw 25, I guess. I mean, Raw 25 was a different beast because it was 3 hours and they had the 2 building thing. I think for like 2 hours probably isn't enough for this kind of show, but for what they had, I think they struck a pretty decent balance of nostalgia and modern day stuff. Including like even having, like they said, the dream match as the main event with a guy that it was synonymous with Smackdown and Rey Mysterio. I enjoyed the show. It was nice seeing old faces and the old clips and like the photos they were showing throughout the show. But yeah, I mean, it was an extra hour probably would have helped this, because much like Raw 1000 in 2012, which was a great show, and maybe one of the best nostalgia shows they've ever done. They just more time to, instead of having guys kind of just show up for cameos, because that's all the time they have, maybe do something more substantial. It would have been cool to see, like, I mean, Rock tweeted a thing this show, but like if Rock was able to show up, I mean, that I don't blame him for, because it's pretty hard to do. But maybe like a Paul Heyman. I mean, Brock was not going to show up on SmackDown, but Brock would have been appropriate. Cena unfortunately couldn't be there either because he was in China, but at least he had the selfie video. So just like I guess what do you do? I guess with SmackDown, but fun show overall. And at this moment, SmackDown has been the A show. So take that, Stephanie, earlier in the night. So that wraps up SmackDown 1000. We'll see if it makes it to 2,000, and that wraps up this episode of Call It in the Ring. I will be back next week for my Monday Night Raw review. If you want to follow me on Twitter and let me know what you thought about the show, hit me up at MarcusStewart7, that's the number 7. And as always, you can download this show on iTunes, Podbean, and YouTube. Just search for Marcus Writes About Games. You can find that and my other show, Carving Gaming Rushmores. You can also find me on gaminghistoria.com, where I write news stories and reviews about video games. You can find me at on 2 Dungeons and Dragons podcasts. One is We Wanted Adventurers, where I play a bard, and we had a big quest, a big hilarious dumb quest going on that we've been releasing. Just search for We Wanted Adventurers on SoundCloud or Libsyn. It's a lot of fun if you're into role-playing podcasts. And the other campaign is called Dragon Guard. where I play a cat man that sounds like Hulk Hogan. Another equally hilarious, actually maybe even more ridiculous campaign. And you can find the same thing, just Dragon Guard at SoundCloud or Libsyn. And you can also find both of those on extralife.com. So, until next time, wrestling fans, I will see you next week. Have a good one.